Today we have a viewer request, and this is a bit of a lengthy video, but I think it's kind of an important topic for me to explain in depth. So I'm gonna read you the original question, retracting some of the personal details. So I have this problem, and I don't know how to deal with it. You see, I kind of bottle up my emotions, and instead of facing them, I feel like it turns into procrastination and unhealthy habits. So, I want to know how to actually feel when I'm sad or angry. I also feel like this blocks my creativity. I don't know how to express myself in the way that I want to, and I think that's because I don't know how to be angry. I feel like sometimes I gaslight myself into not being as upset as I want to be, or I just cry it out and it comes back in another form later. And instead of processing and recognizing when something is bothering me, I take it out on another and I hold grudges, even though I know it's wrong. It just feels right not to talk about it. And sometimes I feel like I shouldn't talk about it because it's not as important to other people than it is to me. You know, Neil Young once said, "Though my problems are meaningless, that don't make them go away. And the things that matter to me and the things that I value, someone else might not get. And I don't want that to get to me anymore." But when it does, I don't know how to deal with it. I can ignore it and I can ignore them, but that doesn't solve anything and it bums me out. So that is the big question. And in this YouTube channel, I give you a lot of what we in the Buddhist world call Dharma. And it's basically pieces of wisdom and insight that kind of tells you that, hey, you are suffering. And you might be suffering because you are misunderstanding something. And why are we able to say this so definitively? Because once you understand everything and once you see everything from the right perspective, there's no reason to suffer. And that is the universal truth. And therefore, if you are suffering, chances are you might be having a skewed perspective on something. Okay, then so what is it? And then we can get to talking about XYZ, right? So I think recently I did I did a bunch of videos on a bunch of different topics, but I always tell you in those short videos what your conceptions might be doing to your feelings, right? So for example, somebody says gets to me and I get very angry. Okay, then I would say, well, they can say whatever they want, but you get upset because you think it is a reflection on the quality of you. So when they say you're a shitty person, you feel like you're a shitty person, but you're not, and you feel attacked. And in the video I might say, but what they are saying is shitty is the reflection of you inside of their head. So it seems like they're talking to you, but actually they're talking to an image of you that they think is you. So it actually has nothing to do with you. When people are upset at you, it's their issue. They must be having a crappy day and blah blah blah. So these things are sort of my attempts at trying to get you to understand that depending on your perspective, right, you can be free from suffering. Okay, that's all good. But there's one kind of a big thing that I don't normally emphasize. And it's that those pieces of wisdom, right, they tend to really land when your heart is open to it. Right? So, there's an opportunity for me to make a lot of money, or it might give me a lot of recognition. But if I'm not open to that possibility inside of here, I do it begrudgingly, right? And so this is what people typically call spoiled behavior. You grew up rich, you grew up with a silver spoon in your mouth, and then you have some good things that happen to you, and then you're like, So somebody gives you water, and you're like, oh, is it Evian? I only drink Evian water. And so these are kinds of the spoiled behavior. when we get good things, but we don't see it as good because we want something way more, right? So, why is that? Because our hearts are only open to the better things and things that are above. Our hearts are very close to the bottom and below. So that's why, when, I don't know, suppose a homeless person comes to hug you, your first reaction is like, oh, right? Because you don't want to be associated with that. Like, there's an implicit understanding that you're better than these people who are going through a tough time, right? So, your heart is closed to them. But suppose a celebrity came and then they wanted to give you a free hug. And they're like, oh my god! You'd be very receptive to it because your heart is open to them, depending. So it's one case. Why this is important for this discussion is, when you're activated, and when you're actively feeling bad right now, you're not really open to wisdom. You're not really open to changing how you feel. So when you are activated and you're like just consumed by this, nothing anyone does really helps, right? So it's like you're having a nightmare, and then the person next to you is trying to like wake you up. Suppose you're having sleep paralysis. They're trying to wake you up, but it doesn't matter until you actually wake up, right? You're consumed by this really freaky nightmare in your sleep and you can't move. And then you're really upset after waking up, right? And then the person next to you is like, well, I tried to wake you up, but then you weren't waking up because to them you were just like sleeping, right? But then you were upset because, like, do you know how hard of a time I've been having? And then it just kind of like passes, and then you're like, oh, but it was just like a random nightmare. You don't give it a second thought after like 3 days, right? So these things pass with time, but when you are actively going through it, right, nothing really helps. And so suppose if you're a driver, you may have had the unfortunate possibility of getting into an accident, whether it's caused by you or not. So you know how to deal with accidents on paper, right? Like, call this, exchange information, blah, 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 blah. But then once your car is actually you're in the accident kind of survival mode, right? Fight or flight. And all the endorphins are shooting out and like your hands are shaking, and I've actually experienced that a few years ago, right? So, when you have these, when you're activated, your heart is closed. But there's a sneakier form of being activated, right? And these are really what block your progress, and these are really what is happening underneath the questioner's mind. They're activated, but they don't know how much they are activated because they don't know how to look inward. So, the events that I discussed until now, right? Like accidents and nightmares, these are kind of like specific things that you can clearly tell after you've stepped out. So, when you're, at home shooting videos like this, I'm not really activated. But once the car crashes, like it's an event, something happens here. And then I'm activated, but then once I forget about it, I can go home. And then now when I look back, I was like, oh yeah, I was activated at the time. So there's like a difference. There's a quantum level kind of a difference. Activation state, non-activation state. Okay. But suppose you have something like CPTSD. Suppose your life is just always a series of prongs just like electrocuting you, like in minute, pulses, and you can't expect when you're gonna be jabbed, or when you're gonna be stabbed, or when you're gonna be attacked. If that is your life, then you don't know what it feels like to feel comfortable. You don't know. And so because you don't know this, because there's no quantum level difference between your activated state and then your not deactivated state, you're constantly activated. And now, here's the weird thing. You have days where you feel good, right? But for regular people, they feel... Sorry, wrong term. For people who aren't constantly activated, it's that happiness sits on top of their baseline mood, which is more or less nothing, right? But for constantly activated people, the brief moments of happiness sit on top of that activation state. And so the happiness is inherently unstable. So that's why it leads to, what if this happiness goes away, right? And can I accept this? And so, because you don't know when you're going to be attacked next. So these are kind of the things at play here when it comes to being activated, right? And so you have to know how to tell when you are activated or not, because that's what that's what gives that quantum, level kind of a differentiation. Okay, but prior to going into this spiel, I talked a little bit about the heart being open and closed, right? And so when you're activated, your heart is closed. And so how to get to that deactivated state has a lot to do with opening your heart. And opening your heart is, to be honest with you, there are techniques like that I provide in this YouTube channel, right? Like EFT and the squeeze techniques and bilateral stimulation. There's these somatic techniques that can help you ground yourself. But these techniques are more about, more for the people who kind of know that what not being activated is like. So somatic tools can get you far, but to be honest with you, I think they tend to be a little bit limited when it comes to dealing with constantly activated states. And for constantly activated states, I recommend highly two factors. Number one, drugs. Because, especially if you are in the case of having being constantly activated, chances are you have childhood trauma that was inflicted upon you, and basically research indicates that when you experience complex trauma at an early age, it actually hinders your brain growth. So there's a very real chance that your brain chemically and biologically and physically are causing that constant state of activation. So when you find the right pair, right combination, or the right dosage, or the right type of neurotransmitters, neurotransmitter-based medication that works for you, chances are it's like the easiest fix. And you don't have to do any of this, like, somatic work, thought work, although it's beneficial for you. Like, the majority of your problems are going to go away. In terms of, like, you feeling constantly activated. And, okay, so, but there are people who are in that gray area of they visit the psychiatrist and they're like, yeah, I guess you have it, but it doesn't really warrant drugs. And so for these cases, it starts with sharing your heart. So, in my book, The Shame Formula, which is available on Amazon and on my website, you get to learn about the dynamics of something called witnessing. And so, when you have complex trauma and when you are, given a life condition that warrants this constant stress, chances are there's nobody really there to give you a compassionate, loving witnessing. Oh my gosh, no, these things shouldn't have happened to you. I'm so sorry that you're going through this. No, all the feelings that you are feeling is justified and it's right. And when you get to understand that the feelings that you get and the feelings that naturally arise isn't wrong, and that you are justified in feeling any feeling, no matter how negative they feel, then it becomes a normalized part of your tools and inventory inside of your emotional toolbox. But when you have one authoritative figure who tells you what is right and what is wrong, then you get to define your life by that one person's rule around what is right and what is wrong, right? So, in order to break this cycle, it helps to initially be witnessed by someone. And that is, to be completely honest with you, a large amount of work that I do as a life coach, right? But in the long run, I don't do my practice so that you become dependent on my witnessing. And so I challenge you in a very loving way to start being that witness for yourself, right? And in order to facilitate that process, I want you to open to me if we are in a coaching relationship, right? But the neat part here is that you don't really need me to practice opening your heart. And the practice of opening your heart is as simple as saying, I feel XYZ because ABC. So, the more honest you become with this, the easier and easier it becomes to actually feel all your feelings. Okay, so suppose I got into a car accident, okay? It was not my fault, right? Because I was just sitting there and then I got rear-ended. And then suppose I called my mom because I was freaking out. And then suppose my mom is like, "Oh, you little shithead, and why did you drive like that? Why do you get into always these types of troubles? And why can't you just stay home and like your sister? And why do you always have to be the troublemaker of this house?" Right? And suppose that happened, right? So, if I grew up in an environment like this, chances are when the prompt of I feel XYZ because of ABC is given to me, I may respond with I feel guilty because I shouldn't have gotten into a car accident, right? Okay, so that's the first layer, and that's totally fine. But that's not really gonna get you that far in terms of what opening your heart is. So there's a good barometer for this. A good barometer is when you say it at the right level of opening your heart, there's gonna be some kind of a deep release. So, I start out with I feel guilty because I shouldn't have gotten into a car accident. I feel unlucky because I didn't do anything wrong and I just got rear-ended. I feel angry because my mom yelled at me without even listening to me. And I feel like I shouldn't exist because she tells me I'm always such a troublemaker. And I'm always, worse than my sister. And I feel like I'm being punished by all these bad things. So these are the things that are what's really in your heart, right? And you can see how at the top level there's this I feel bad, I feel guilty. And then the more you get real with yourself, the more open you become to truly experiencing what you are feeling. And the more you do this exercise, the more fluent you will be in identifying what you are actually feeling. Not here. Not here, 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 but like deep down in your heart, what you are feeling. And that is, I think, a good introduction to feeling your actual feelings. And it does help a lot when you say it out loud or express it to someone who is listening. So, for that purpose, I operate a Discord channel, a server actually, and a window. This is my witnessing. This is my Discord server called July Life Coach, and in here there is a channel called Witnessing. So, in this channel, there are no coaching. I don't give you advice. I don't try to change how you feel. I don't try to change how you think. This channel is for opening your heart and being witnessed for it. So it's a very loving container. So if you want to practice opening your heart and feeling what you actually feel, please join my Discord channel and join the Witnessing channel and say what's on your heart. If that feels a little bit too vulnerable because you feel like you might be identified, you can always DM me on Discord. I think you may need to friend request me first, or you can message me on Instagram, you can write me a comment here, or you can email me at billy@julylifecoach.com and tell me how you feel. And I would love to witness everything that you are experiencing. Turned out to be a 20-something minute video, but I hope this helped, and I'll see you the next time.